Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for having us here. And it's a pleasure to be on the Include conference, even from remote. But let's start with the presentation. I'm Elisa Molinari. I'm a project manager at Fondazione LIA. And for the sake of this presentation, I'd like to share that I have a master's degree in Italian literature. And here with me, there's my colleague, Gregorio.
Hi there. I'm Gregorio Pellegrino. I'm the Chief Accessibility Officer in Fondazione LIA, and I'm a computer engineer.
Okay, so we both work at Fondazione LIA. Just a few words about LIA. It is a not-for-profit organization set up in 2014 by the Italian Publisher Association with the support of Italian Blind Union. And our mission is to promote books and reading in all its form, and to foster a culture of accessibility within the publishing industry. So it's really a pleasure to be here today talking about a theme which is really important to us, which is alternative description of images, which is a theme that we would like to address in accordance to different point of views, a more editorial one and a more technical one. That's why Gregorio and I will alternate during this presentation. So why is it alternative description difficult? Because it's really difficult sometimes to find the perfect words for a very specific image. And on the other hand, sometimes the same words are perfect for many different images. Let me show you an example. So what about if I tell you which one is the image of a blue bird? Which is the first image that comes into your head? It may be this one, a photograph of a bird with blue feathers, or maybe it could be this one, which is the Twitter logo, completely different image, but image of a blue bird suits this as well. Or if you were a fan of Angry Birds some years ago, it could be this character with, again, a blue bird. So this example just to show you how difficult it is sometimes to find the perfect words for a very specific image. So we'll try to reason about some practical tips that we share ourselves while we have to produce alt text. But let's start with the basis. What is an alt text? Gregorio, could you please help us with the definition?
Yeah, the alt text stands for alternative text, which is a textual representation of non-text textual contents. So for example, for images, you can have a textual description that is passed to the assistive technology, which is the technology which is used by blind or visually impaired people to access content. So visually impaired people can get the image, the content of the image through the alternative text using the text-to-speech or digital or electronic braille or braille via Bluetooth.
Okay, perfect. And what about the requirements for EPUBs? Why is it important?
Yeah, as you already know, I think having alternative description for all non-textual content, it is a requirement for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines and therefore for EPUBs. So each image, if it is meaningful in the context, has to have an alternative description. And then in the next slides, we can try to understand which images are meaningful and which are not.
Perfect. So the million-dollar question, who should take care of providing alt text? We tried to summarize this theme with a graph. So we think that on average, an editor, so the question is, how does an editor spend his or her working time as for the very job? So we think that 30% of the time is about text editing, 70% of the time is about complying with the request by authors, and 0% of the time, if you're not accessible yet, is devoted to image description, to create alternative description. So this is definitely a task which has to be added to workflows which don't feature accessibility yet. And there's a perfect solution which works for everyone. So every organization needs to understand if they want to internalize this competence and acquire the knowledge or externalize it. But either solution, we think that it's important to know what is an alt text, why it's important, why it has to be done, so that everyone who has to deal with images knows that in the middle or in the end, someone will have to provide an alt text. So before starting to delve into the alt text part, we'd like to provide you with just a list of 3 different types of image description. Not all are linked to accessibility, but we think it's useful to understand which are the tools that we have when we have to describe images. First of all, we have captions. Captions are not related to accessibility. And what are they? They can be a title or a short description about a photograph, an image. They are visible to everyone, so it's not just for screen readers, and they're not required by the accessibility. Usually they are below an image or in the surrounding. Then we have an alt text. This is mandatory, as Gregorio said. So you have to provide an alt text for every image which is not decorative. So to every image which provides and conveys information. What is it? It's just a short description made of plain text, so you can have very special features, and it's inserted as an attribute to the image. Is it visible just to screen readers and search engines? Maybe, Gregorio, can you specify how it's visible to search engines?
I mean, search engines like Google's, Yahoo, Bing, and so on, they use web scrapers that actually work like screen readers, because they get the content of the web pages without actually visualizing it. So they use the alt text to try to understand the content of the images presented in the web pages.
Okay, thank you. So if you provide the alt text, your images and your publication, your website will be better for search engines. So provide an alt text is very good if you want to be higher in the rankings in accordance to search engines. And the third part is the long description, which is not mandatory, but what is it? Is a more detailed explanation of the image, which is used when the content of the image is very complex. For example, a chart on infographic. So just few words are not enough to provide data, numbers, information. So you can have a longer description. How could you insert this long description within an image?
Actually, you cannot within the image, but you can add a link near the image that links to the long description, or you can use other HTML tags, for example, summary and detail. There are different ways to do it. There are different techniques, but the idea behind it is to have a place where you can have the whole data behind a graph or a list representing the content in the image. I mean, the whole content of the image in a textual way. Okay,
thank you very much. So moving on, we'd like to focus a bit on the different kinds of images that we can have. First of all, we can have decorative images, so images that don't convey information, but they're just there in that point because of decoration. So how can we describe these images? Do we have to, in terms of alt text?
Actually, we can leave the alt text empty, which means that this image is an artifact, or we can use other codes like ARIA codes to say that it is a non-meaningful image in the context.
Okay. Then the second one are informative images, which are the most common. So they are images which convey meaning to the audience. So it's important to provide an alt text. And in a moment, we'll get to some practical tips on the length of the alt text. But it's here we are interested in sharing that it's fundamental to provide alt text for these kind of images. They can be photographs, graphs, pictures, logos, but we'll get to that in a moment. And the third kind are functional images. So images which don't have to be described by their appearance, but by the meaning that they convey. For example, this is a phone. Usually I am expecting to find a phone number just on the right of this phone image. And how does it have to be described in terms of alt text? What do I have to say in this case?
Only the action you can do with this kind of icons. So for example, call or telephone or something like that, and not the image itself. So no icon of a telephone in black and white, which is not meaningful for the user.
Okay. Last but not least, we can have complex images. Nowadays are more and more frequent in our publications and website. What are they? They can be graphics, infographics, images full of data, numbers, details. So in this case, as mentioned before, the alt text won't be maybe the best, the only solution, and we will have to provide also a long description. So it really depends on the image and the number of details that we need to specify. So let's say that overall we should consider to provide also a long description.
Yeah, in this case, I would make a table with the data which is behind the infographic. So for the different transport mode, the gender percentage, so that the user can click on a link and get the data through the table.
Okay, thank you. So we'd like to share right now some really practical tips that we use ourselves while we produce the alt text. So first of all, it's to focus on the main goal. What does it mean? The goal is to provide the very precise information that very precise image conveys in that very precise context. So it's important to understand which is the scope of that image in that place. So the question that we ask ourselves, first of all, we want to read everything which is in the surrounding of the text, so that to understand if the image is already described somehow in the surroundings. And so what do we ask ourselves? Do we have already a caption? If so, we don't want to repeat, copy and paste the same information of the caption in the alt text, so that the screen reader won't repeat twice the same information, but to provide other kind of information. And again, we want to read in the text if there are a lot of details available. What else? We invite you not to use new words and introduce new concept while you are writing an alt text, and to use words which are already available in the text. And last but not least, think about your audience. If you are working on a textbook for primary children, you want to use a very simple words, short sentences. If you are producing alt text for publications for university students, you may want to use a different kind of words and language. But as a first step, it's really important to have a complete overview of the image and the surrounding. For example, in this case, we are showing a picture available, which is featured in our latest publication. And in this case, the chapter is about our catalog of accessible ebooks. There are a lot of details, and there's a caption available. So in this case, the alt text will be really, really short, and will just say screenshot of LIA catalog of accessible books. We won't need to describe the different features and characteristics and titles which are shown in this very moment. Second, less is more. What does it mean? That when you provide alt text, it's really important to be concise and to provide, and not to have too many details if they are not fundamental. So you may want to start always with a general informative sentence which provides, let's say, the framework. And then if you need to add more information, you may consider to have a long description, which, as Gregorio said, may feature also some list, or maybe add a couple, one sentence more. But the goal is to be concise. The best practice is to have 125 characters alt text, and to know that the default limit of screen readers is set at 250 characters. This can be modified, but you can have an idea of the kind of length which is expected when you have to write one. Another concept which is really crucial to us is about teamwork. So a good practice is always to write your alt text as Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen in this photograph. And a best practice is to write and then ask for a review of a colleague which is not aware of the book, for example, of the publication, so that reading it can give you a feedback saying if it's clear enough, if it's, again, brief or long enough. It's important also for grammar errors, which you may write. So it's really important to check and double check. And if you can't count on a colleague, it's important it may be useful to read it the following day so that you can ensure that your sentences are clear enough. Another important part is to be neutral as possible. So you don't have to provide judgments, feelings, and personal opinions. For example, in this moment, I'm showing a photograph of a kitten. It's not a photograph of a fluffy, adorable, nice kitten. I don't like kittens very much. So the feeling that I have towards this, it's not related to good feelings, let's say. But it's really important when you have to provide alt text to be, again, neutral as much as possible. So as you may have understood, this is mostly an editorial job, and right now is made by, let's say, editors or person who somehow work with the text and the images. But one thing we are working on is understanding if and how artificial intelligence can help us in this theme. So I'd like to ask to Gregorio if he can tell us more about some experimentations that we have done in the previous months in this area.
Yeah, thank you, Elisa. Yeah, so since 2 years, we are exploring machine learning for trying to describe images. We have seen that online platforms already have algorithms for getting content out of images, photographs usually, but editorial content is full of other type of images which are not photographs. So we started to explore this kind of solution for getting content out of pictures. We started it with the University of Siena, with Tommaso Dringoli, who made our first pilot project. This first pilot project is based on different categories for images. So we started with 12 categories, the problem of describing an images, and we split it in 2 parts. The first is getting the category of the image, and the second is getting the description itself of the image. Okay, so we identified 12 different categories to put an image in, so to get which kind of image it is, and then from the different categories we are using different software solutions for getting the content itself. So our process works with an EPUB, and we extract all the images from the EPUB. Then we use Google Cloud Vision AutoML to get the category of the image itself. And then through the category, we decide to use both Google Cloud Vision API or Microsoft Computer Vision to get the description itself based on the different categories. So the overall accuracy is not really high. We have 50% for the description and 42% for the category. But we think that working on the categories, we can improve these results. So we are now working with the Center for Research, National Research in Italy, for having an omnicomprehensive taxonomy for describing all the type of images and pictures that are available in editorial works. And so we worked this year for having this whole taxonomy, and we are starting to create data sets for training new kind of algorithms for getting the right categories out of images. So we think that in the next years, maybe we can get more and more accuracy in the work. So maybe then the algorithms can help us in our daily work.
Okay, so we hope that we have provided you with a short overview but meaningful at the same time of the topic of image description, and we will be glad to hear from you both on the editorial side and the artificial intelligence side. So if you want, just get in touch with us. Those are our contacts, and in the meantime, enjoy the conference and Bye.